homeschool to.
Oops, sorry. That was
It's
not
all good.
supposed to be in the middle. Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
I was saying, I'm kind of thinking together with the mom to probably start with homeschooling as opposed to regular public school system, and so researching. That's what I'm doing right now. But like 99% decided on homeschooling right now.
Okay, awesome. Great. And I think that that's a great decision to make. Even though I have most of my experience
Hmm.
in public education over my years, I have really just kind of shifted, and I think that we can offer so much personalized instruction to our kids and really just kind of help guide them in where our family wants to be, wants to head. And so I think that's a really great calling that you're listening to and responding to. Awesome. Anyone else?
Okay. Yeah, my daughter-in-law's getting ready to start homeschooling two at the same time. So I'm just here picking up some tips for her because it's been easy just doing one out of three, but this year becomes two out of three. So just getting some tips on what I can tell her in her journey.
Awesome. Well, welcome. That's definitely a big undertaking to have not only one, but to have multiple. So thanks for being here, and I hope that there will be things for you too. There definitely will be. Okay. So as we move through, just to kind of outline where we're going to kind of section our time together, we'll take the first little bit of time to just think about, I've broken it up into what I think will be helpful to think about for week 1 and week 2. So I've broken that up. Now, if week 1, if we go through this and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot to do in 1 week, you can spread it out over 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever feels comfortable. And that I think is part of the beauty of homeschooling, is that we have that luxury of time that we can be flexible and kind of play with what's working and what's not working. So we're going to talk about how do we find our starting point, and how do we find what rhythm could work, and what do rhythms look like, and how do we want to set that up for our own family. And then we'll take some time to think about how do we build this into consistency. We'll name some common mistakes to hopefully avoid. And then we will take some time to think about just like some reflection and some reflective practices that we can add into our own teaching style. And then at the end, there will be there'll be a couple bonuses. I have a couple of free, I'll say resources that I'd love to give you. And then an opportunity that if you'd like to continue this conversation, if this resonates with you and you want to continue with it, then I have an opportunity for what I call a clarity call. So welcome. As we know, sometimes starting homeschooling can feel overwhelming. We start to question, where do I begin? We have this fear or hesitation of if I'm doing it wrong. And those are all very natural. However, the truth about teaching and teaching at home is that you don't need to have a perfect plan. We need to have a starting point that works for your family. And this guide will walk you through exactly what we need to focus on in the first couple of weeks so that you can build that confidence quickly. So I would encourage you to get a paper or a pen, or if you have your notes on the side of your computer. I think that there will be some good things in here that you can walk away with to make sure that you get the most out of this. So I want to start with talking about what are some of the things that matter the most when we think about setting our rhythm, finding our clarity. And I think when we think about homeschool, there are so many different components that we're considering and thinking about creating. But I want to kind of focus us and center us on that the connection with your why and who your child is and how they learn really has to come strongly before we can start even thinking about curriculum, right? And then we want to think about how can we create a structure that will build the plan that we want them, the guidelines of the planning that we want our children to walk in their learning. And then how do we use that structure to build consistency rather than intensity? And I want to kind of focus on the consistency over intensity because there's a lot that we're considering, right? There's a lot that we're considering. There's a lot that we have to do and implement. But it's a long game, right? Whether it's a school year or whether it's multiple school years that we're homeschooling, we have the time to build that consistency. Um, so we're building a system. And that can look different. We want it to look different from school, right? We're probably pulling them out of school because something about it isn't working, or maybe many somethings are not working anymore. And so we're recreating that, which can feel like a huge, crazy abyss. But hopefully, after today, we can put some of that structure into place. So I want to start with a framework of a 5-step plan. So the first is to clarify your vision. Then we set realistic expectations. We choose core subjects, and then we adjust as we go, right? And so we'll walk through all 5 of these definitely in the first 2 and or more weeks, right? As we are incorporating our schooling. And I also want to say too, Yandro, if for you Lois too, if you're pulling them out of school this year, but you're thinking about starting next year, the other beauty about starting homeschool is you can kind of start whenever, right? We don't have to even follow the school system calendar. I have one, I'll say client, but one friend of mine who she starts in the beginning of January because the calendar starts in January, and that makes sense for family, right? And then with like summer, right, we still want to honor, especially like if she's been in school, we want to honor the fact that like you can have your break and summer still exists, right, while we're transitioning. But incorporating some of these pieces as we're building and exploring what these things can look like for the structured time when we get there. So the first 3 things that I want to talk about in week 1 are building our foundation. And so we have number 1, which is understanding our child's learning styles, creating a simple daily rhythm, and starting small. So what does this look like? When we understand our child's learning style, we're thinking about what are they engaged in? Are they big readers? Do they like to write? Are they more kind of tactile, exploratory? Do they like to just kind of get their hands in and do things? Do they like worksheets? Do they hate worksheets? And those kinds of things. We want to pay attention to when they have the most energy, right? So at school, they're required to focus and pay attention, but at home, we get to kind of play with that rhythm, right? If she's a slow morning, then maybe we start in the afternoon. If afternoons are busy, maybe we try to get it in the morning. Notice how they engage, right? Are they talking? Are they moving? Are they building? Are they reading? And then we think about, after we pay attention to what their learning styles are, then we start to incorporate small chunks of structured time. So this could be 10 to 15 minutes of connection, whether that's talking or reading or asking questions or answering their questions. And then thinking about what are 2 core subjects that we might want to focus on per day. And then also noting that the breaks within the day, and those breaks could be snack breaks, they could be cleanup breaks, they could be, chore breaks, all kinds of things. That's also part of the learning. They're part of life skills that we're teaching our children, right? And then we start small, right? Timers as a teacher and as a professional who's managing a lot of different tasks at the same time, timers can be really helpful to be like, okay, this is my allotted time for whatever. But it also helps the child to feel that expectation of how much time do I have to focus on X task? And that kind of helps alleviate that pressure from, oh my gosh, this is going to take all day, just like school.
Yeah.
Great. So I'd love to pause here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go to the next slide and then I want to get some feedback from you on the next slide. So we're thinking about those 3 things. And then when we think about our curriculum, our schedules, and what matters most to us, I'd love for you to take a moment to think about those things that we just had on the screen, and I can put them back on the screen. But you can think about why you're homeschooling. We sort of already answered that, but what do you want your days to feel like? What matters most? And what maybe do we want to focus on when it comes to curriculum, structure, routine, academics, creativity? So I'd love for you to just take a couple quiet seconds here to gather your thoughts, and I'd love if you want to share off mute or put it in the chat.
All right. Got it. How do you want it? How do you want it?
Give it to me raw. That's all right. I can handle
All right, all right, all
it.
right, all right. So, I'm choosing homeschooling because the current situation in public schools are not the best. You see a lot of, different types of situations that go from bullying to social pressure and even violence, so even drugs. So there's a lot that you could see and hear from people who actually work on the system, and that's why I'm exploring this. That's the why.
Okay.
How do I want the days to feel like? I would say that I'm not opposed to some type of discipline, having a rhythm well defined, but still
Mhm.
having the flexibility that, if there's traveling in the middle, there's no reason to pressure the kid that only uh, he can only take or she can only take 10 days off during the year. That doesn't make sense. If at the
Mhm.
end, you're academically okay. And what matters the most right now is, aside from the flexibility, it's still making sure that uh, whatever system is designed, it still matches, and it's not gonna diverge a lot from whatever is expected to resume probably public schooling later, like 2 years from now or whatever. So
Mhm.
making sure that whatever credits or tests or whatever are happening at the state level will still be you know done on this style.
Yeah. Awesome. Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm going to answer for my daughter-in-law, but um, I'm going to say choosing homeschooling is because of raising three little kids, because they still have a 1-year-old at home. And I'm going to choose the word flexibility because with three little kids, it's got to be flexible between nap times and meal times and snack times, and it's she needs to accomplish but still be flexible just because, and that's why she chose homeschooling, because managing three little ones, I mean the little guy's just a year now, so now she's got a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old. It's gonna take some flexibility. Even if she had to get him to school, that would be flexible. But yeah, so I'm gonna choose flexibility. um and she's very creative, so I think creativity would fit well into her academics. So that's me
Thank you. Yeah.
for her.
Awesome. And I think too, right, is there's so many reasons why we choose homeschooling, right? And I think, Yoandra, as you were saying, I mean, just overall safety, whether that's physical or mental or emotional safety, especially at middle school age. It's a very
Hmm.
influential time. And to make sure that, as parents, we're offering the protection and the guidance that you want her to have over her life. Um, and and I really like the word that you used, discipline. I think that's probably a little bit of it. To me, it feels a little like a harsher word, which is why I use like flexibility and structure. But I do think that like there are many disciplines in life that are so important to learn. And so I really like that lens that you brought to the conversation. And having that, that routine, that discipline, and helping her create that in her own responsibilities as well. Um, and my little travel heart, okay, the flexibility of like wanting to travel whenever you
Hmm.
want to go, like, hey, that's learning too. There's tons of learning that
100%.
can happen
Yeah.
when you're on vacation or wherever you're going. Um, and yeah, and Lois, as you were saying, just like having the flexibility, that season of life where there's lots of little ones at home, there's so much going on. And so and it's also a really I think it's a really tender time to want to make sure that like as you're raising your little ones, right, you're really being that strong influence on their life and creating
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
foundational values for their life. So thank you for sharing. All right. So then we think about realistic expectations. This is kind of a tough one, and I see this one a lot in like forums and conversations, right? It's like, oh, I tried to do 4 hours of homeschool with my 6-year-old. And so I took some of this. So these So these time frames come from developmentally appropriate kind of like engaged focus times for each kind of or excuse me, age band. And so for ages 5 to 7, an hour, and I'll say an hour to 2 hours. 2 hours is on the high end, but an hour to 2 hours of focused time, and that can be broken up throughout the course of the day. Ages 8 to 10 is 2 to 3 hours, and then middle and high school can be anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. And so keeping that in mind, right? Like the breaks, like I said earlier, the breaks count, snack breaks, lunch breaks, if she wants to go out and walk the dog or get outside and get some fresh air, like those, that's also part of it, right? Like when we compare it to school, they're getting up and they're switching classes to go to art class, or, they're moving around and they have these brain breaks. So that's also important. And I think I mentioned too, just about like pausing in the daytime to have a brain break to empty the dishwasher or clean up their room or fold their laundry, whatever that might be. Those are life skills and that discipline that we can help build those routines in their rhythm and their lifestyle as well.
Mhm.
And so just to kind of remember and help our brains remember that more quote unquote learning time or disciplined time is not necessarily better, right? To find that balance of what works for your kids. And so again, here I've kind of broken it down into like activity times. So for Joandro, you have a middle schooler, right? So we're thinking about that 3 to 5 hour timeline, right? I would start on the 3 hours, right? Kind of play with that. And I'll say assigning, but presenting tasks that maybe might take her 25, 30 minutes to do and see how she does with that, right? And then you can build over time. And for the littles, it can be a little more, they have shorter attention spans. So we're going to have multiple activities and have shorter amounts of time for them to engage with things and then switch to something else. So thinking about now, we kind of have like our clarity, thinking about rhythm and kind of what realistic expectations could look like in a day or a week. Do you have any thoughts or preconceived, I don't want to say preconceived, but have you had any expectations kind of running in your brain before this? Have they shifted or changed now that I've kind of shared that information?
The most important part probably is related to understanding timing and what could be probably appropriate when it comes to how long do the sessions have to be between, every subject or, rest time, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I think about all of these things from a learner's perspective as well. From like me, I work on the computer all the time. And it's like I'm an adult, but like after an hour, I'm like, woof, I need to get up and move, I need
Yep.
to move my body.
Mhm.
So they also need that same, affordability. Anything else we're thinking about?
I think the
No.
value of the weekends would be vital. It doesn't have to be a 7 day a week homeschool, because I know, the littles are active and, they want to do things, the parents want to do things with their kids. So yeah, make sure it's got value of the weekend.
And I'm so happy that you brought that up because that made my brain go somewhere else. Yes, weekends are extremely valuable. But the other aspect of this is you could do homeschool 4 days a week if you wanted to. You don't have to do it 5 days a week. If you want to add in, especially at the middle school level, if you want to be like, hey, if you put an extra hour or an extra 45 minutes in today and tomorrow, we don't have to do school the next day. And you can plan a fun activity to do
Yeah.
outside of the home. And incorporate it maybe on the weekends, but in an inobscure way, right? Like it's maybe not structured sitting at the table filling out worksheets and filling out comprehension questions and math papers, but you're doing outside active learning on the weekends, right? So there's that flexibility that we have with it. So now I want to talk about number 3, which is how we choose our core subjects. And again, like I said, we start with 2 core subjects. Start simple. We don't need to have everything right away. I would say when I think about instruction, I think about the focus subjects, right? Reading, math, writing. Those things are big things. right? Science and social studies, I've put over on like light exposure optional because they can be incorporated into a lot of different things, like a lot of different, they can be incorporated into reading, it can be incorporated into like outside life or conversations. And so we don't need to have a whole sit down structured lesson for social studies and science every single day. And then the other thing that I want to note here is when we're thinking about curriculum and how to keep our kids on pace, we don't want to overload their schedule so that there's so much to do that they automatically shut down. And then when we think about buying curriculum, I like to put a pause on that because there are so many curriculums out there. There's also a lot of free resources. And we can also use, I know you, Andrew, you were saying about, making sure that she's on target for her grade level in case, she has to get back into public school or whatever, after graduation, college, all of those things. There are state standards that we can follow. There are lots of different ways that we can make sure that we're on pace, that we don't necessarily have to spend hundreds of dollars on a curriculum that we're just not 100% sure on yet, right? And so I'd love to hear too. These are like these are the, what do we got? 7, 6 core subjects that we see in school. We also have art, music, and our special classes. But are there any other subjects or topics that you're excited to incorporate into your home learning, or things that you're really excited to kind of like unfold with them?
I mean, at the moment, I haven't decided on specifics, but yeah, definitely would like to have some type of extracurricular, subjects, whether it's technology or something else like research or whatever.
Yeah, awesome. Those are ones that I definitely would not have thought of, but I think that that's so smart is technology research, right? Those are huge. Awesome. And I know things like character. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Like character building. And if you have religious beliefs, you can incorporate those kinds of things. Lots of different ways that we can incorporate. And then you had said, Joandro, about extracurricular things, right? So when I was asking about core subjects, those are things that and I think like research and those things that you mentioned, I would put under core subjects. But then we also have any extracurriculars, sports, dance, singing, anything else that maybe they go to a club or they have club sports that they can participate in, and things like that. Those are all incorporated. And then number 4 is building that daily rhythm. So starting with a flexible flow, not necessarily a rigid schedule. So have we thought about where are we going to have a designated space for learning? What is that going to look like? Are we going to set up a desk at home? Are we going to use an office space? We're going to use the kitchen table. That's fine. Helping them to become prepared with their materials, giving them timers or expectations for when the learning is starting and what they need to come prepared to engage in that learning. And so this is your starting point, and we adjust as we go, right? So if the designated spot for learning doesn't work, then we shift and we do it again. Maybe we want to sit out on the lanai, or it's a cool morning and we want to get some fresh air, so we go outside. That's fine too. And then I think organizing this space and helping students become prepared, or helping students come prepared, is really, that can also just be like day of, like, hey, we're going to be doing this today and we're going to need XYZ. Make sure you have it in 20 minutes and meet me here, right?
Oh, that's good.
And so as a flexible rhythm, right, this is just a very generic example, right? But maybe you have a morning connection time, and then whether that's, morning breakfast, chores, whatever that might be, and then you get into your learning block. You have a break, whether it's a snack break or a lunch break, and then you have your second learning block. Maybe you incorporate in there interest-based or outdoor learning or something that's like low pressure, but also engaging in the academics, right?
I like that idea of the kids being prepared for when they're ready to start school, because especially my littles, that's a great thing to start when they're that young, to know that, gather your things and let's go. That's a great plan for life, really. Get your shoes,
Yeah.
we're going, you know.
Yeah. And so as you're thinking about this, are there structures that are coming to your mind or things that you're thinking about how your child learns or what your daily rhythm could look like?
Yeah, we need to decide on the specifics of a specific time to start, but I would definitely try to set up a space, supposed to be, being in the room. So I know also that, the burden of probably feeling that you're still on the same place where you're sleeping and also, receiving classes or whatever. So ideally, a, different location of the house for that would be the other thing. And yeah, the rest is I'm still like reading what you're exposing here to, grab some ideas.
Yeah, awesome. And I think too, like for the middle school age, I think you could go middle or high school or even upper elementary. This, I don't know, the personality of your daughter, but right, is like this could be a fun time for them to get organized, right? You get them like a little space. She can decorate
Mm.
it. Like it can be
Mm-hmm.
her space to make her own, and be excited to come and engage in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I agree. So, I mean, the kitchen table works great for a lot of reasons because it's just like everybody's there, people want snacks all the time, and it's a big open space that we can lay out all of our stuff. But it can also be nice to have a separate space, for them to just kind of get focused. It kind of helps, like, I'm doing this because I feel like it kind of like not puts us in a box, but like it helps us get cozy and like, okay, this is where I focus. And then when I step away from this space, my brain has that mental break, to
Mm-hmm.
step away to. Awesome. All right. I'm going to jump back here for just a second. The other thing that I'm thinking about as a middle schooler, right, is like middle schoolers always want to sleep in. So you could like, that's a big win. You could let her
Mm-hmm.
sleep in if you wanted to. Like all your friends have to get up, but we can still get all this
Yep.
done and you get to sleep. Yeah, so you can be flexible with that rhythm. And then number 5 is the last one, and is to adjust as you go. So things will feel messy and just kind of chaotic at first, and that's normal. It's okay. You might notice that timing doesn't work for things, or you're like, whoa, I thought this activity was going to work and it definitely didn't, and we need to change that. And then there also might be some resistance, right? And I think about you, Andrea, you had mentioned something earlier that made me think of another conversation I'd had about how another homeschool parent was just saying that sometimes one of the things that she wasn't prepared for was kind of this battle of being teacher authority and being mom authority.
Hmm.
Um, and so, it's like, okay, we're overwhelmed about math, but now I'm getting this math pushback for the dishes or for the clean the room, or,
Hmm.
like
Mm.
they're
Yeah.
mixing. And so that's where I think too, like having a designated space can be helpful for all parties involved,
Hmm.
but then also being aware that you are both of those, I'll say, authority figures. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes just complete decompression for both parties is helpful, and then we come back, right? And so don't be like, I'll say try not to be, because I know that you probably will be. It's natural, but don't be hard on yourself when things don't go right away, because it's an
Hmm.
ebb and flow. And she's learning her rhythm, you're learning your rhythm, and you're learning each other's, right? Are
Hmm.
you going to be, Yonder? Are you going to be the like the main teacher for her?
Probably to some extent, there are things that the mother could probably, contribute to, but I think I'm going to be pretty involved.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And I love that. Again, adjustment is not failure. It's how we build a system that works for us. It's trial
Hmm.
and error. We do that in all areas of our life. And so thinking about that, right? Like you've had your daughter for 12 years, right? Like, or 11 or 12 years, right? You know who
Hmm.
she is.
Hmm.
And Lois, I'm sure you know that you know your grandkids too, but like what adjustments do you already make when a day feels tough? Not even talking about homeschooling. When a day feels tough or a scenario feels tough, what are ways that we adjust?
Well, I know one thing that works for those littles is just change the environment and go outside. If assuming that it's happening inside, going outside just clears the air and changes their attitudes. So that's always a plus.
I would agree to that. That's a very good strategy.
There is scientific research behind that, so y'all are onto something, right? It helps for all of us. So yes, good. Get those kids outside. Good. Okay. So as we kind of close up this like week one summary, right? We've talked about the five-step plan of clarifying our vision, setting realistic expectations, choosing our core subjects, building that daily rhythm, and then adjusting. So as we pause here, you can share or you don't have to share if you don't want to, but I'd love for us to just think about which of these feels like the biggest priority for you to focus on.
I'm going with number 4, building that daily rhythm, with the
Mm-hmm.
change from 1 to 2 kids.
Yeah.
How do you get it all accomplished?
Yeah, I'm at probably number 3.
Okay.
Yeah, because she's older. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and really, really thinking
Yep.
about what are those? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So then thinking about the structure and the clarity and all the things that we just talked about, how do we make this consistent, right? So now, again, everything that we talked about, I put it in 1 week. I think as we're talking, it could probably take 2 to 3 weeks even to figure out what that looks like and feels like for both parties. So maybe this should be called part 1 and part 2. But week 1, part 1, right, is going to take some time. And so we want to continue that as we build consistency, because consistency is what helps everyone feel grounded to know what to expect and how things are going to go. So how do we follow our daily rhythm? How do we observe what's working and maybe what's not? And what are some small, simple adjustments that we can make? So when we observe and we're looking at both our rhythm, our students, how our student is learning, what that feels like, some things to pay attention to are, when do our children focus best? And when are they a hot mess? Because hot mess express is not when we want to be teaching, right?
Mhm.
We want to figure that out. What causes frustration, right? How long do tasks actually take? So even in public school teaching, there are suggested timeframes of how long things should take, and it doesn't always follow through, right? Sometimes it takes way longer, other times it takes way shorter. And what types of activities do they enjoy engaging with, right? And so these observations help us to really begin to personalize our homeschool, to figure out how can we lean into the things that are working for both us and for our children. And so thinking about making these observations and adjusting and tweaking what works and what doesn't work, a couple of common mistakes that I want to just name are that we're not replicating traditional school at home, right? We're pulling them out for a reason, or we're not putting them in for a reason. And we already discussed like the time frames of what that can look like, right? Which even at the high school level, 3 to 4 hours is half of a school day, right? So you still can get so much of it done in less time. Doing too much too soon. We're not going to be able to do it all, right? And who knows what even is all, right? If you go on the internet, which can be helpful, but also can make that laundry list exponentially long. But really staying focused to your why, and some of those things in that first checklist of 5 things really helps us to kind of simplify what are our focuses. Don't compare your children to other people. And I know that is so hard, especially when something is new. We want to know what other people are doing, how they've been doing things. And while that can be helpful, it can also be a heavy mental load that's not always helpful. And can bog us down. And so just remember the uniqueness of your child, the uniqueness of your family structure and your home life, and your intention. Fall back on that intention of you're doing the right thing for your child, and your intuition. So lean on that. Right. And then expecting independence too early. And I think this goes not only for the little ones, but also sometimes it can get lost in the shuffle with the older ones as we see them as older. But then it's like, oh, well, they can do this. They can do this alone. but this is also something new. And so I like to call it like a guide by the side or like a facilitation. We're building that confidence of their self-independence at home in their learning structure. We're building that together.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah,
Give me
go
just a
ahead.
second, please.
That part of comparing your child to others, I mean, as soon as you have the second kid, you start comparing, so I think this is a good point that I can talk to her about, but I know those two girls are very different from each other, and they will learn at different paces. They're going to learn a completely different styles. I know that just from watching them play. So yeah, to not compare number two to number one, if it doesn't work the same way that it did. I like that point. Yeah, got to remember that one.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, even in the same household, right? Like I'm thinking,
Yeah.
you had one, but even in the same household, you have two very different personalities, right? Two different learning styles, two different, I mean, they like different colors, they like to play with different things, their uniqueness, and then incorporating that into learning. So yeah, we can't expect them all to be exactly on the same page. And then the next thing, or I'll say the last part of building that consistency at home is I think really making sure that you carve out some time for reflection, whether that's at the end of the week, it could be at the beginning of the week, whenever you can fit it in. But taking some time to think about what worked well that week, what felt challenging, and what do we want to adjust next week? Even if something went great, we still might want to adjust it, right? And really taking some time to think about how will we make those adjustments. And even if it's just a small tweak, small changes still lead to those big improvements over time. And a small tweak and a small adjustment doesn't mean that you failed the week before, right? It's just a learning, it's a data point. All right, so the last thing that I want to talk about, Yonder, you just have one at home, right? Or one that you'll be
Yes.
homeschooling? Yeah.
No,
And then
no,
most of
just
them.
one at home. That's it.
Okay. So I'll say this one, maybe I'll say it will apply to you because it's not just about multiple ages, but there's different things. And then Lois, also for the multiple ages that you're mentioning and the differences, right? So it says, what happens when I have multiple ages represented in my home? And this could also be like, what if the textbook or the curriculum that's going subject by subject isn't working for my kid, right? One thing that I love to, I'll say suggest, and like one thing that we have the luxury to incorporate into our at-home learning is topic or unit-based studies, and leaning on like the interests of the students. So what are they interested in? What are they gravitating towards? And lean on that and incorporate that into the material and the instruction that we're trying to teach them. And then with multiple age ranges, you can differentiate the assignments or, tweak the assignments to be age appropriate for the learners in your home. So when I talk about topic and unit-based studies, they are, again, a topic or a unit that that is the focal topic, and then we incorporate, how do we get reading into this? How do we get math? How do we get science, history, geography, art, music, all these things? How do we incorporate that? And suddenly we have all these subjects that we're teaching and they're practicing all within one umbrella. So I'll give you an example, right? A gardening unit, right? Anybody like to garden? Anybody have?
He says,
That's okay.
We do some.
Okay. I just kind of picked it because I feel like, I mean, for me, it was an easy thing to like align things to, but also, everybody's doing these homesteading things and, planting all of their own herbs and things. But so something that you're doing at home, right? For this instance, a gardening unit. You can focus on your science for the life cycle of a plant. You can incorporate measurement as you're measuring the growth of the plants. You're kind of checking them, right? That can even be more science, right? Are we keeping a log of what we're learning? Take them to the library, have them find their own books on gardening that they're interested in, engage that inquiry based. We could talk about geography if you care about geography or want to include it, right? Where do certain plants grow best? Why? We can incorporate art or music, create a garden sketch, make a song, write a song if you want about a garden. You can incorporate history, the history of agriculture, or where and when people used gardens. And then this could also be cultural, right? How do different cultures, or where do different cultures produce things, and why do certain produce grow in different areas and not others, right? And so we have so many subjects that are already embedded into one unit or one topic. And within that, we can then expound on their critical thinking, their problem-solving skills, their interest-led learning, and then span it across multiple ages for age-appropriate activities. And so interests are what lead their learning and can what guide you. So I'd love to pause here as we kind of finish up and think about all the things that we talked about, which I know is a lot. But what has this session highlighted for you? And what are you taking anything away from this that you want to focus on this coming week or in the next season of your planning?
Yeah, mostly scheduling, and like I told you, sitting and reflecting on which are going to be the set of core subjects that we will address first.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a couple takeaways. I'm going to say the flexibility of it, and then those unit studies that incorporate so much at both levels for both girls. That's going to be key for what she can accomplish. Yeah, I like that.
And especially with multiple children at home, and especially if they're younger, there's a lot happening at home at that season of life,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
how can we simplify this for ourselves? And Yolanda, I'm curious to know, when you think about like the subjects, because you've mentioned this a couple of times, when you're thinking about the subjects that you're wanting to, I'll say choose, are you thinking more about like kind of what curriculum am I going to choose, or how am I going to incorporate math, or how am I going to incorporate reading and science into the learning?
The second one.
Okay. How are you? Yeah. And I think, I don't know, this is where I'm like, hey, you my guy, because I think curriculum can be a really helpful tool, okay? But I think sometimes curriculum can box us in. And so when I love to, in terms of like thinking about subjects and what are those core subjects, as a teacher, I like to go, especially trying to make sure that she's on track and she's tracking with the rest of the people in her age group, is if you go to the state standards, especially for Florida, and look at state standards for whatever, 8th grade math or 7th grade math, whatever she's going into, I think either your and or her creativity could just like fly in like what she could be interested in. And then you can kind of connect so many different subjects. And I would be happy to kind of share with you maybe at a later date, if you're interested, how that can look at a tangible level. So that's I'm really, I'll say, curious and excited for you to kind of think more about how to pull in those different subjects, because I think having that unit and topic-based agenda can be so freeing almost, in a sense, because then you have that flexibility. You're not stuck to rigid curriculum boxes. So I was going to skip this one, but I don't want to skip it because it's really important. So I'll say that you're doing better than you think. Starting is the hardest part, and you've already done it. You've already decided that you're going to do it. Your brain is already going as to how you're going to support your daughter-in-law, how you're going to support your daughter. And confidence doesn't come from having all the right answers. It comes from showing up, which is what you're doing tonight. It's what you're doing in your thinking and your processing time, learning, doing your research, looking, having conversations with different people, and then adjusting, right? How do I take what I have now researched or what I'm learning, and how do I adjust it, put it into practice, and adjust it more, right? And I think that building a homeschool structure is so much more than just learning. It's building those foundational core aspects of life, and you're doing it with your loved ones in your home. And I think that's a really special place to be. So as we kind of close out tonight, I want to note that I have a free guide that helps you kind of think through some of the things that we talked about today, defining your why, understanding your child's learning, their learning preferences maybe, or their learning styles.
Yeah.
And then how do you choose your approach for teaching? And there's also some other goodies in there. There's also some things, Yondra, as you're kind of getting into these, there is a page on there about like logistics, like where do I start for like the state level? Who do I have to notify? What do I have to do? There's links in there for that. And so, Yondra, I don't know, before I got on, I didn't see your registration. If you could put your email in the chat, I will make note of that and I will send you an email with these things in there.
Got it. Well done.
Perfect. All right. And so this guide really, I'll say, supports all of the thinking and the things that we did, and can just be like a helpful place to structure your thinking and give you a nice way to collect all of these thoughts, because I know this was a lot of information that we went through. Before I go to the next slide, I want to kind of just pause and see, are there any other outstanding questions or thoughts that we want to bring to the table today?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
I think I'm pretty good too.
Okay, great. So then as we close out, I want to thank you all for being here. And I have really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm really excited for the places that both of you are in. And I'm going to send that document to you both. Lois, I have yours from the registration. And so I will send that to you after we get off the call here. But if you want more information, or you're like, hey, this was really helpful and I'm thinking about some more things, like I would love just kind of like a thought partner to talk to about this, I do have a free clarity call that I offer to all of, like, anyone who comes to these workshops. It's free, so you're not entitled to anything by joining or scheduling a call. But it's just a personalized one-on-one call where I can help you maybe take some of what we've talked about, what you're thinking about, and take maybe a little bit of the next steps afterwards.
Okay.
So if you want some time to write down my email address or scan the code, we'll bring you to my scheduling. I'll leave this up for a couple of
I got a
minutes.
screenshot already, so I can
Okay,
digest
perfect.
first, and I got it.
Okay, perfect. Then you can
Yeah.
get back to it. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining and just for
Thank
being so
you.
open and sharing. You're welcome. I hope that this was empowering for you, both encouraging, and gave you some good things to think about.
This was really good. Yeah, good.
It was. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, then you are free to
No,
leave. And
we'll
thank you
stay
for
in
joining.
touch. Okay.